take a minute and talk about something that you may have heard of and may not know how to do, called the Lifeline. This is frequently used in lace or in different stitch patterns, stuff like that. It's a really, really easy technique that's going to really save you during this time when you're stuck at home. It makes things much easier. So I just wanted to demonstrate. I've taken some worsted weight yarn and a tapestry needle. It's obviously very contrasting to what I'm using. I recommend that you use probably a little bit heavier weight or same weight as the yarn that you're working on for doing the Lifeline. You can also use dental floss. It works well, but a contrasting yarn will make it a little bit easier if you need to pick up those stitches again. We're going to hope you never need the Lifeline, but that's the reason we do it, so that you don't need it. Okay, so what I'm going to do is I'm going to move all my stitches down onto the cord, and I'm going to take my contrasting yarn and my tapestry needle, and I'm going to carefully thread it through every single stitch. Now it's on the cord so that I have the space to do this. If you're on the needle, it's a little bit more difficult. That's the only reason it's on the cord. And I'm just going to gently go through and make sure I get every stitch. I want to try to keep the yarn under the cord, but you can see mine's kind of moving around on me a little bit. That's okay. When you do a Lifeline, you want to make sure you do it on the same pattern row of your repeat every time you do it. So if you have a 16 row repeat that's lace, choose a plain purl row to do it after, or a row without a lot of pattern on it. Choose that row, and every time you put a Lifeline in, it's going to be right after you've done that row and you've counted your stitches and you're confident that your pattern is correct. Sometimes that's the last row of the repeat, sometimes it's a middle row. If, say, you have a 16 row repeat and you do it after row 16 the first time, that doesn't mean you have to do it every single row 16. It means anytime you do it on 16. The reason for that is if you have to rip back, you need to know where you are. So make a little mark on your pattern, or make a note on a post-it note or whatever that's kept with your pattern, letting you know where you were when you put the Lifeline in. Otherwise, it's not going to do you any good. Okay, so to demonstrate how this works to take it back out, I'm just going to knit a few stitches. I'm going to be real careful that as I'm knitting my stitches, I'm not grabbing that Lifeline. If you accidentally knit the Lifeline, you're going to have a little bit bigger problem. It'll still work. It's just going to confuse you when you go to move on. So Lifelines don't have to stay in indefinitely. If you do 2 or 3 or 4 of them, you can always just pull the first 1 or 2 out. I reuse them. I'm stingy that way with my yarn. Okay, so that's enough to show you what it is we're going to be doing. I just wanted a few stitches on there. Normally, you'd have another inch or 2 that you'd have to rip, but I think you'll get the idea. So I've now discovered a mistake in my work, and I don't know how to rip out. I don't know how to frog. I have no clue, but I know that I put a Lifeline in. So I'm going to go ahead and just take my needles out. Now remember, we're going back an inch or 2, okay? Use your imaginations. You can do this. And I'm going to rip. And when I get there, it won't rip any further because I have a Lifeline. Okay? The Lifeline acts like an extra needle or an extra cord of a needle and holds those stitches for me. It's like a yarn holder. If you've ever put a stitch holder in, it's the same type of thing. Then I'm just going to take my needle and I'm going to feed it through all these little threads that are over my nice contrasting yarn. When you pick a contrasting yarn, guys, don't pick red. Red bleeds. And if you're using white yarn, you'll be really mad at me. Don't use red, okay? Don't use something with a lot of blue in it. Sometimes that'll bleed too. If you're using a commercial yarn like Barocco Vintage or Encore or something like that, you'll be okay. But if you're using a hand-dyed, because that just happens to be all you own is hand-dyed yarn, then please just don't pick a red or something real saturated, okay? Something contrasting. This is one of those times when really cheap yarn is a good thing too. All right, so I've put all my stitches back on. 2, 4, 6, 8, 10, 12, 14, 16, 18, 20. I've counted. I've made sure that I have the correct number. I know that I finished on a repeat row number, whatever it was, and I am ready to start knitting again. My yarn is here. I'm just going to slide on down to the other end of the needle and away I go. And there you have it. That is how you insert and use a Lifeline in your work. I hope that you never need to actually use the Lifeline or take advantage of the Lifeline, but I also hope that you insert them so that you don't need to. Okay? Happy knitting, everyone!